Have you ever stopped to think that maybe everything they said about masculinity is wrong? That this idea of modern man, who lives tired, distracted, and without direction, is not evolution, but castration disguised as freedom? The truth no one wants to tell you is simple. You are losing your vital energy day after day, and calling it normal. But what happens when you stop wasting and start retaining? The answer is as powerful as it is controversial. Your true masculinity awakens. And I'm not talking about muscles or testosterone. I'm talking about magnetism, clarity, presence. While the world teaches man to seek pleasure in excess, the few who choose the path of semen retention discover an ancestral strength, something that comes from within, that cannot be bought or faked. It is the energy that shapes leaders, builds legacies, and effortlessly commands respect. But no one talks about it because we live in a culture that profits from weakness. Pornography, addiction, cheap dopamine. It all feeds a cycle of invisible slavery. And you, without realizing it, may be trapped in it. The proposal here is bold. What if you could restore your essence just by changing what you do with your sexual energy? It seems too simple, right? But it is precisely this simplicity that is frightening. Because it demands responsibility. It requires presence. It requires abandoning excuses and taking charge of your own life. And when you do that, something changes in your gaze, in your voice, in your posture. Semen retention doesn't give you magical powers. It reveals what's always been in you. This transformation does not take decades. Some feel it within weeks. More focus, more self-respect, more natural magnetism. It's not theory. It's a practical result of a body that stops bleeding energy and starts storing power. But be careful. This path is not for everyone. It's for those who are tired of living half-heartedly. For those who want to get out of automatic mode and rediscover their natural state. And, as difficult as it may seem, that decision starts now. So tell me, are you ready to find out what happens when your energy stops being drained and starts being cultivated? Because if you are, what comes next will change your perception forever. From an early age, lustful thinking is planted as something natural. Commercials, social media, films. Everything invites us to look at each other with uncontrolled desire, as if this were proof of virility. But the truth is different. When pleasure becomes an obsession, man moves away from his essence. He exchanges mental clarity for empty fantasies. It's like trying to build a castle on quicksand. The foundation won't hold up. And that's where the practice of semen retention comes in as a cornerstone. Little by little, those who begin to practice semen retention notice something curious. Impure thoughts lose strength. Not because the person became a saint overnight, but because they chose to interrupt the vicious cycle between stimulation and discharge. It's like retraining your brain. It is no longer the body that rules the man, but the opposite. This reversal of command restores lucidity, like cleaning foggy glasses and seeing clearly for the first time in years. Men who have kicked their porn addiction report that, after a few weeks of semen retention, they can walk down the street without being overcome by dirty thoughts. They look firmly into the eyes, listen carefully, feel more present. This changes everything, even the little things. More focus on work, more emotional control, more self-respect. What was once automatic is now conscious. The mind returns to command. A practical example. Do the following exercise. For 7 days, replace any impulse of artificial pleasure with a building activity. Read a chapter from a good book like The Power of the Subconscious or Man and His Symbols. Meditate for 10 minutes or just take a cold shower. Notice how much your state changes. This is reversing the effect of lust, stopping being a slave to an impulse to becoming master of yourself. And the most impressive thing is that this awakening is not the end of the journey. In fact, it's just the opening of a new portal. Because once the brain begins to disconnect from lust conditioning, it needs to reconnect with something bigger, something that goes beyond immediate pleasure. And that's exactly where true reprogramming of the mind comes in. The male mind is highly plastic, which means that it molds itself according to the stimuli it receives. For years, many men have conditioned their brains to react intensely to banal triggers. An image on Instagram, a memory from the past, or even a visual cue on the street. This type of hyperstimulation creates an artificial sensitivity that depletes the nervous system. But when semen retention begins, the brain begins to silence this internal uproar. At first, withdrawal seems difficult because the brain is addicted to easy dopamine. But over time, the circuits that fuel the compulsion begin to weaken. The synapses that previously fired within seconds upon sexual stimulation are being replaced by calmer, deeper pathways. And this completely changes the way a man feels attraction. Excitement stops being something quick and urgent, and becomes something more whole, more connected to the whole. If you are a man looking for more energy, focus, and self-control, I have prepared a powerful ebook that will show you how semen retention can transform your life. Link in the first pinned comment. A good practical example of this is when man begins to notice the beauty in things that previously went unnoticed. A sincere smile, a deep conversation, a gesture of kindness. The mind stops seeking immediate pleasure and begins to value what is more subtle. This is a clear sign that the brain is being reprogrammed. And this reprogramming doesn't stop there. It also affects focus, discipline, and even the ability to memorize and create. Do you want to strengthen this new standard? Go on a digital fast for 24 hours. No social media, no videos, no stimuli. During this time, write down everything that comes to mind in a notebook. You will be surprised by the amount of mental garbage that emerges, and you will realize how semen retention enhances this cleaning process. This is neuroplasticity in action, removing the old and planting the new. And so, with a cleaner brain and a less reactive body, man begins to reconnect with what is pure, with what is noble. Because the more internal perversion dissolves, the more space opens up for something that transcends desire. Something that brings dignity and elevates the way of relating to the world. When a man begins to free himself from the vices of his mind, he notices a subtle, but profound, change in the way he sees women. That energy of anxious conquest, often loaded with second intention, begins to give way to a cleaner, more centered presence. Semen retention moves the predator's gaze away and brings the gaze closer to the real beholder. Interactions that were once driven by desire are now fueled by respect, curiosity, and authenticity. This is where the power of purity is realized. And I'm not talking about forced chastity, but about inner integrity. Purity is not the absence of desire, but rather mastery over it. A man who practices semen retention begins to experience this. He feels the desire arise, but chooses not to be dominated by it. This transforms his vibe, and women notice. The magnetism changes, it is no longer carnal, it is energetic. He attracts not by lust, but by presence. An example of this is when a previously shy man begins to talk confidently, without trying to prove anything. He feels comfortable being himself. There is no longer that tension of expectation, that desire for validation. He is whole, firm, and that changes everything. On a date, he is not just looking for a body, but a real exchange. This raises not only the value of the conversation, but also the value he places on himself. Do you want to practice this purity? Start by observing your own thoughts during conversations. Notice when the mind begins to fantasize or become distracted. Instead, pay attention to what the person is saying. Take a deep breath, listen with your heart. This creates a presence that is rare these days, and extremely powerful. Semen retention helps with this because it stabilizes energy, reduces anxiety, and amplifies clarity. And when purity sets in, man feels something different within himself. He begins to respect himself more. And this self-respect is what shapes true masculinity. But to understand this in more depth, it is necessary to observe the natural role of sexuality, not only in modern man, but in the evolution of the species itself. Since the most primitive times, the sexual instinct has been a powerful force behind male behavior. But what many don't realize is that this impulse doesn't just exist to generate pleasure. It carries within it a biological, almost divine intelligence. The peacock opens its tail not only to seduce, but to show strength, health, and presence. The lion roars not only to mark territory, but to convey sovereignty. Man, in the same way, has fuel in his sexual energy to express his highest potential. Semen retention reminds us of this. When man holds this fire, he redirects the strength to other areas: work, art, spirituality, leadership. It's as if he were accumulating internal electricity, ready to be used in creative and constructive actions. The transmuted libido becomes focus. It becomes courage. It becomes magnetism. It is no wonder that so many great leaders, inventors, and spiritual masters spoke of the importance of controlling sexual energy. An example: think of Nikola Tesla, who claimed that abstinence fueled his genius. Or in Gandhi, who defended celibacy as a tool of spiritual power. They understood something that few today understand. When instinct does not dominate man, he becomes master of his own destiny. And this mastery is expressed in small attitudes. The guy wakes up earlier, speaks more firmly, makes decisions more clearly. All this because he is aligned with the force that created him. If you want to experience this in practice, start by channeling your sexual energy into clear goals. Set a weekly goal. Finish a project, read 100 pages of a profound book like The Kybalion, train intensely or learn something new. Use that internal fire as fuel. Semen retention isn't about avoiding pleasure, it's about using desire as a ladder to greatness. What I'm explaining here is much more detailed in my ebook The Power of Semen Retention. There is a simple step-by-step guide for you to apply in your everyday life. It's really worth it. And when this energy is well directed, man realizes something curious. He stops being a reactive animal and becomes a conscious being. And that's when a new question arises. What separates the virtuous man from the one who gets lost in vices? The answer lies in the contrast between what builds and what destroys. A man's life is basically a choice between two paths, that of virtue or that of vice. One leads to strengthening character, presence, mission. The other, to the weakening of the soul, will and purpose. It's like two invisible roads that fork every day, and semen retention is a clear divider between them. Because the man who chooses to guard his energy also chooses to guard his dignity. He doesn't trade his strength for crumbs of pleasure. Virtue, in this context, is like invisible muscles. No one sees it, but everyone feels it. The virtuous man walks into a room and doesn't need to say anything. His gaze is firm, his posture conveys respect. The man given over to vices walks hunched over, talks a lot, tries to compensate for his emptiness with ostentation. He seeks in excesses what he has lost in essence. And this difference is perceived not only by others, but by himself in the silence of consciousness. Examples of this are everywhere. The guy who invests in his own growth, who reads, trains, prays, serves, overflows with true masculine energy. Those who spend hours consuming pornography, toxic foods, and empty content feel weak, anxious, and lost. One lives like a king under construction, the other as a servant of his own needs. And this difference isn't subtle, it's stark in the long run. If you want to walk the path of virtue, start with small daily rituals. Take 10 minutes of silence when you wake up. Read proverbs or excerpts from books like Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Help someone without expecting anything in return. Choose a practice that elevates your spirit and apply it consistently. This sounds simple, but it creates deep roots that support your inner castle. And with semen retention, each of these actions gains even more strength and direction. But there is a secret that few know: virtue cannot sustain itself. It needs to be fed from within, by something that restores man's essential energy. And that's where the next stage comes in, where continence becomes a source of clarity, vitality, and even spiritual evolution. Sexual continence is much more than just not ejaculating. It is an act of reverence for one's own body, one's own mind, and the masculine essence that, over time, has been drained by harmful habits. When a man practices semen retention, he stops this invisible bleeding and begins to restore his original strength. It's as if he was rebuilding himself from within, brick by brick, until he rediscovered the solidity that always existed within him. It was just buried. This energy, which was previously lost in minutes, begins to circulate in the body in a more intelligent way. Man feels more energetic when he wakes up, more firm in his speech, more creativity in his mind. It's as if the light comes back on in your eyes. And it's not magic or exaggeration. They are secretions, hormones, vital substances that stop being wasted and start nourishing the nervous system, the brain, and the spirit. This is science and spirituality going together. Do you want to feel this restoration in practice? Add simple practices to your day. Meditation focusing on the center of the abdomen, also called the hara or dantian. Breathe deeply and visualize your energy accumulating there, like a golden sphere. Do this for 5 minutes before bed. Additionally, consume live foods, fruits, roots, and seeds that help keep your vibration high. Semen retention is enhanced by this care and accelerates this process of internal rebirth. And this restoration even impacts the way man expresses himself in the world. He starts to be more selective with words, gestures, and even the people around him. It's as if something inside him said, "You can no longer get dirty with what takes you away from your purpose." Continence takes you away from vulgarity and brings you closer to the sacred. Easy laughter becomes wisdom. Anxiety becomes presence. The impulse becomes a vision. But the most beautiful thing is that this new man begins to affect the environment around him. Your energy is contagious, your discipline inspires, your peace attracts. And, naturally, this new behavior begins to reflect on the relationships he has, especially in the way he behaves towards women. When a man sincerely practices semen retention, he changes. And when he changes, everything around him also begins to change, including the way he deals with women. Before, the look was marked by desire and urgency. Now, there is presence, respect, and clarity. He is no longer seeking to fill an inner void, but rather sharing his wholeness. This makes your relationships lighter, more authentic, and, above all, more true. A fundamental point is that self-perception changes. The man sees himself as someone of value. He no longer accepts anything, nor does he allow himself to act out of lack. Semen retention strengthens self-esteem without needing applause. This is visible in the walk, in the tone of voice, in the choices. He begins to behave like someone who has a mission, and not like a teenager who is eternally in need of attention. The world feels this and responds. Don't leave it for later. Click on the first pinned comment, purchase the ebook, and start changing your energy, your mind, and your life today. See, for example, how conversations with the opposite sex transform. There is no longer that tension of conquest, of pleasing at all costs. The man who holds back his energy is their whole, wanting nothing more than genuine exchange. This drastically reduces vulgarity. He doesn't need to prove his masculinity with dirty jokes or forced phrases. He expresses himself firmly but gently. He commands respect, but with lightness. This is real magnetism. Do you want to strengthen this posture? Avoid environments where superficiality prevails. If possible, spend less time with people who are still stuck in empty patterns. Instead, look for purposeful conversation circles, in-depth readings, study groups, or practices like shamanism and yoga. These spaces raise your vibration and refine your conduct. Semen retention finds support and nutrition in these places, and this reflects in the way you relate. But not everything is external. Sometimes the biggest enemy is still within. Old habits, hidden addictions, unresolved impulses. And this is a delicate point, because many men fall into the illusion that they are evolving while they continue to harbor shadows in secret. And that is precisely where the greatest danger lies. The silent moral decline caused by modern vices disguised as harmless pleasure. Pornography is one of the most powerful male weakening tools of the modern era. And the cruelest thing is that it disguises itself as relief, freedom, even self-knowledge. But the truth is different. It reprograms the brain, destroys self-respect, and transforms the sacred into banal. Semen retention is an act of resistance against this degeneration. It's like rebuilding walls in a city that has been sacked for a long time. With each click, a man's brain associates pleasure with something empty, immediate, unreal. This causes a silent moral blackout. Emotional sensitivity diminishes, the sense of value for a woman's body disappears, and masculinity distorts into caricature. Many think they are just relaxing, but inside they are becoming emotional zombies. Semen retention returns command to the spirit. It resets the system, cleans the addictions, and rescues the conscience. A classic example: a man who consumes pornography daily begins to have difficulty connecting with real women. You lose interest in true relationships, create unrealistic expectations, and feel empty right after the discharge. It affects sleep, motivation, and even your face. Yes, the face. Because facial expression carries the signature of the soul. A man exhausted inside reflects this in his eyes. Those who practice semen retention tend to have brighter eyes and firmer features. Do you want to break out of this cycle? Block the websites, change your routine, and start filling your time with activities that require real-life energy. Writing, running, studying philosophy, playing an instrument, building something. The energy that would be drained needs a new channel. Otherwise, the addiction reinvents itself and returns in disguise. Semen retention is like turning off the waste tap, but it also requires building a strong reservoir so it doesn't overflow into hidden vices. And it is in this reconstruction that the man realizes that the problem was never just the act itself. It was what was behind it, the emotional hole, the emotional void, the lack of belonging. And when he begins to investigate this, he discovers that the root of lust is not in the body, but in the psyche. Behind sexual obsession there is almost always unhealed pain. The mind, in an attempt to escape emotional discomfort, ends up seeking immediate relief from physical pleasure. Many men carry wounds from childhood, lack of affection, rejection, feeling of invisibility. And these scars, even if they are not consciously remembered, shape behaviors. Lust, in this case, becomes anesthesia. Semen retention, in turn, is like ripping off the bandage and facing the wound head-on. When a man stops feeding this addiction, he begins to perceive an emptiness. At first, this is scary. It seems like something is missing. But that something was never porn or casual sex. It was self-love, it was presence, it was a sense of real connection. The practice of semen retention gives men the chance to listen to themselves, to delve into what is repressed and transform pain into strength. It is a process of maturity, not only physical, but mainly emotional. Let's be practical. Do you feel that anxiety hitting you? Instead of rushing to an explicit video, sit down, take a deep breath, and write down 3 things you wish you had heard when you were a kid. It can hurt, but it can also heal. When you name your pain, it loses its power to dominate you. This type of emotional practice, combined with semen retention, is a powerful shortcut to self-knowledge. Because true mastery is not over desire, but over its origin. And the more man investigates this root, the more he understands that lust is not the problem. She's just the symptom. The real hole is in the disconnection with one's own value. A man who truly values himself does not give himself away for crumbs of pleasure. He demands more from life. He demands more from himself. And this demand leads you to grow. Semen retention, in this sense, is not just containment. It is an affirmation that you deserve more than fleeting pleasure. But not everyone is willing to take this internal journey. Many prefer to proceed automatically, even if it costs them their vital energy, their relationships, and their dignity. But at some point, everyone will reach the inevitable crossroads, the point where they will have to choose between continuing in the cycle of escape or awakening to true transformation. There comes a time in every man's life when he stops and thinks, if I continue like this, where will I end up? This is the crossroads. It's not an epic movie scene with lightning in the sky. It's silent, intimate, and, often, painful. That's when the guy realizes he's wasting his life for crumbs of pleasure. And that semen retention is not just a technique, but a decision of who he wants to become. It is the point at which man stops dragging himself on the ground and begins to lift his own statue. One path leads to stagnation, more addictions, more distractions, more excuses. The other leads to construction, more discipline, more vision, more purpose. But there is one important detail. It is not possible to walk in both directions at the same time. Either man surrenders to cheap pleasure, or he accepts paying the price of greatness. And this price, although high, is worth every penny. Semen retention is the ticket to this new level of consciousness. Do you want to make that real choice now? Take a piece of paper and draw 2 columns. In one, write the man you will become if you continue your addictions for the next 5 years. On the other, write what your life will be like if you are firm in retaining semen, practicing self-knowledge, and cultivating virtues. Read this out loud. Feel the impact. The clarity of this comparison is the push that many need to break out of inertia. This choice is not made once, it is remade every day. It's in the no that you say to the stimulus, in the time you get out of bed early even if you don't feel like it, in the decision to study instead of being distracted. They are small yes to the man you want to be. And, interestingly, the more these yes accumulate, the easier it becomes to say no to what drags you down. Semen retention is like a compass constantly pointing north to your identity. But this compass only shows the path. You are the one who needs to walk. And now that your eyes are open, there's no turning back. Because once you understand the truth about your energy, your mind, and your purpose, to ignore it would be to betray yourself. Now that you understand all this, tell me, are you going to continue sabotaging yourself, or are you going to act like someone who really wants to change their life? Because, at the end of the day, What separates an ordinary man from an extraordinary man is the willingness to do what most people avoid. Semen retention is not a fad. It's a key to restoring your sovereignty, your magnetism, and your personal power. And that key is in your hands now. The question is, will you use it? You've seen that addiction isn't just physical. It is mental, emotional, spiritual. And if you got this far, it wasn't for nothing. Something in you has already awakened. Maybe it's still a whisper, maybe it's already a scream, but it's real. So take advantage of this momentum. Starts today. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just be committed. Start a challenge. Write down your progress. Share your journey. And if you fall, get up with more strength. Because every day of retention is a step towards the man you were born to be. And before you leave, answer me here in the comments. What was the strongest part of this content for you? At what point did you feel like something inside you changed? I want to hear you. And I want to see you applying this. Because knowledge only becomes power when it is put into practice. So be honest with yourself. What are you going to do in the next 24 hours to get out of autopilot and take control of your energy? If this video touched something inside you, like it now, this helps the content reach more men who need this truth. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell, because here we don't romanticize addiction, here we give you the map to become a complete man. And remember, this is just the beginning. The transformation is continuous. And if you want, I will be here to guide you on this journey.